The battle for Dawson's Bridge. It was a humid July morning, the kind where the air clings to your skin like a second shirt. I was knee-deep in chicken feed, trying to keep my flock from staging a coup over the last scraps, when I heard the crunch of tires on my gravel drive. I squinted through the haze, expecting a delivery or maybe my neighbor Tom with another jar of his wife's peach jam. Instead, a white SUV rolled up, gleaming like it had just been waxed for a car show. It parked right at the foot of my Bridge, built by my father, reinforced by my uncle, and crossed daily by my dog Rusty and a gaggle of unruly hens. Out stepped Margaret Hensley, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, dressed in a crisp blazer and wielding a clipboard like it was a sheriff's badge. She was flanked by two lackeys dragging orange barricades, the kind you'd see at a roadwork site, not on a private farm in rural Tennessee. Without so much as a nod, she started hammering a private, no trespassing sign onto the cedar post my dad carved back in '78. I stood there, shovel in hand, wondering if I'd missed a memo or if the world had just lost its mind. "Margaret," I called, wiping sweat from my brow. "What in the Sam Hill are you doing to my bridge?" She didn't look up, just kept stapling papers to the post like she was decorating for a bureaucracy parade. "This structure," she said, voice sharp as a tax audit, "violates Willow Creek's updated access regulations. As of this morning, it's closed." Closed. My bridge. The one I crossed twice a day to reach my barn, where my old Chevy pickup sat parked. The one my chickens wandered over to peck at clover on the other side. The one that spanned a sleepy creek separating my 10 acres from the gravel lane leading to Willow Creek. A gated community of retirees who spent their days debating mailbox colors and the morality of wind chimes. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't process the absurdity. "Margaret, I've owned this land for 20 years. The county deed says." "We've revised our plat," she cut in, thrusting a faded document at me. It looked like it had been printed on a typewriter older than my tractor. "This bridge now crosses community-adjacent property, subjecting it to HOA oversight. You'll need a permit to use it, and until then, it's off-limits." Community-adjacent? I stared at her, half expecting her to crack a smile and admit this was a prank. But her face was all business. Her eyes narrowed like I was a stray dog on her lawn. Behind her, her minions were zip-tying barricades across the bridge, blocking the path Rusty and the hens used to get to the meadow. I gestured at my truck on the other side. "So you're saying I can't get to my barn? My animals can't cross?" She handed me a form titled Temporary Pedestrian Access Pass. "For emergencies only," she said, like she was doing me a favor. I took the paper, my hands shaking not from fear, but from the sheer gall of it all. This wasn't just about a bridge. This was an invasion, a power grab by a woman who once fined a neighbor for overly festive Christmas lights. Before I could tell her where she could shove her permit, a commotion broke out. Rusty, my mutt with a knack for chaos, had spotted the intruders and decided to make his feelings known. He barreled down the hill, barking like a hound from hell, followed by 3 hens who thought this was their cue for a jailbreak. They slipped under the barricades, scattering gravel and sending one of Margaret's lackeys diving for cover. A hen flapped onto a folding chair, and Rusty, in his glory, knocked over a potted geranium Margaret had probably brought for community beautification. "That's it," Margaret shrieked, snapping photos with her phone like she was building a case for the Supreme Court. "You'll be fined for trespassing, property damage, and unpermitted animal activity." I watched my animals turn her orderly blockade into a barnyard circus and realized there was no reasoning with this woman. This wasn't a dispute. This was war. I grabbed my phone and dialed the county sheriff's office. The dispatcher, a sweet woman named Judy who'd known my family for decades, listened to my rant with a mix of sympathy and amusement. "I'll send someone out," she said. "But, you'll need to tell them to come by the back road. Sounds like your bridge is a crime scene." "Actually," I said, "that road's flooded from last week's rain. Can they come by water?" A pause. "Sheriff Daniels says she'll bring the boat." And so, I ended my morning perched on a lawn chair by the creek, sipping tepid coffee and waiting for a law enforcement officer to paddle up like some backwoods admiral. Rusty sprawled beside me, chewing on a stick, while the hens clucked indignantly at the barricades. Margaret and her crew had set up camp on the other side, complete with a folding table and a canopy, like they were hosting a tailgate for zoning violations. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew one thing. If Margaret thought a few signs and a clipboard could take my bridge, she was about to meet the Dawson family's stubborn streak. Sheriff Laura Daniels arrived an hour later in a battered John boat, her deputy tying it to a stump while she waded ashore in boots that had seen worse than my creek. She was a no-nonsense woman, the kind who could break up a bar fight and charm a church potluck in the same breath. She took one look at the barricades, the signs, and Margaret's makeshift command post, then raised an eyebrow. "All right, Hank," she said, adjusting her sunglasses. "What's the mess this time?" I handed her the stack of HOA papers, some smudged from Rusty's attempt to taste them. Laura flipped through them, her lips twitching like she was fighting a smile. Across the bridge, Margaret stood with her arms crossed, flanked by her Patrol 2 retirees who looked like they'd rather be golfing. Laura didn't hesitate. She marched across the bridge, ignoring the no trespassing signs, and stopped in front of Margaret. "Explain this," she said, holding up the papers. Margaret launched into her spiel. "This bridge falls within the Willow Creek Community Overlay District, per our updated land use strategy. It's a safety and access issue." "What's a community overlay district?" Laura interrupted, her tone flat as the creek bed. Margaret faltered, then recovered. "It's a designated transition zone for HOA-managed properties. We voted it in last month." Laura's eyes narrowed. "Did the county approve this?" "It was an internal board decision," Margaret said, clutching her clipboard. "That's not how property law works," Laura said, slow and deliberate. "You don't redraw deeds over brunch and expect the state to nod along." Margaret produced a folder, thrusting it at Laura like it was a trump card. "We have maps, legal documents." Laura opened the folder, frowned, and pulled out a grainy aerial photo that looked like it was taken during the Nixon administration. The creek was barely visible, and a road that hadn't existed in decades was labeled Primary Access Route. Another page, dated 1964, outlined a community vision plan that included a gazebo where my barn now stood. Laura handed it back. "This is nonsense. You're basing a blockade on maps older than my truck." I stepped forward, trying not to grin, and handed Laura my own evidence. Drone photos I'd taken last month, showing the bridge, the creek, and my property lines, certified by the county surveyor. Laura studied them, then nodded. "That's what I thought. Hank, you got the deed." I pulled it from a Ziploc bag, me Dad's original deed, complete with his handwritten notes and the county seal. Laura read it, pointed to a clause about waterway rights, and chuckled. "Margaret, unless your HOA owns the creek bed, you've got no claim here." Margaret didn't flinch. She pulled out a new document, signed and dated a month ago. "This is a land use agreement," she said, voice smug. "It includes a land swap that places this bridge under HOA easement for safety access." I snatched the paper. My name wasn't on it. Neither was the county's. "You swapped land you don't own?" I said, incredulous. "It was an internal agreement," Margaret said, shrugging. Laura stared at her for a long moment, then turned to her deputy. "Call the county clerk. Tell them we've got another ghost deal out here. Last time it was a fishing pond." Margaret's composure cracked, just a hair. Things might have calmed down, but then a drone buzzed overhead, its camera pointed at the bridge. A man in a county assessor's jacket emerged from the trees, followed by a woman with a video camera and a news van sporting the Channel 7 logo. Someone, maybe a neighbor, maybe Judy at the sheriff's office, had tipped them off. This wasn't a private spat anymore. It was a spectacle. The assessor started measuring the bridge, asking Margaret why she'd posted emergency use only signs and why my dog had been cited for unauthorized transit. Margaret's answers grew clipped, then frantic. She tried to spin it as a safety initiative, but Laura was already on the phone with the clerk, pulling up digitized property maps. I stood there, arms folded, as Margaret's paper empire began to crumble. And then Laura handed me an envelope from the clerk's archives. "Hank, did you know your dad applied for a ferry permit in '66? I blinked. "Eh, what?" "Yep," she said, grinning. "This bridge was originally a private ferry crossing. The permit's still valid. Means you can charge tolls to cross this creek, bridge included." I turned to Margaret, who looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. "So I can legally charge people to cross my bridge?" "Run it by a lawyer," Laura said. "But looks like it." By dusk, I'd nailed a sign to the post. "Toll bridge, $5 to cross. HOA double." Next to it, a mason jar for dog treat donations. Rusty sat guard, tail wagging. Margaret stormed off, her clipboard trembling. Laura tipped her hat and promised to return if the HOA tried anything else. The bridge was mine again, but this was just the beginning. The sun dipped below the oaks, casting long shadows over the creek as I sat on my porch, a cold beer in hand, staring at the new toll sign on Dawson's Bridge. Rusty sprawled at my feet, gnawing on a rawhide bone someone had tossed in the donation jar. The mason jar was already half full of crumpled bills and quarters, mostly from curious neighbors who'd stopped by to gawk at the barricades and laugh at the idea of Margaret Hensley's HOA being outmaneuvered by a farmer and his mutt. I figured the sign was a joke, a way to rub salt in Margaret's wound. But by morning, it was clear I'd underestimated the power of a good story. Word spread faster than a brush fire. By noon, a line of cars stretched down the gravel lane. Folks from town, retirees from Willow Creek, even a few teenagers on bikes, all wanting to see the Rebel Bridge for themselves. A woman in a sundress handed me a $10 bill, said she was paying double just to stick it to the HOA, and snapped a selfie with Rusty. A guy in a pickup tossed in a 20 and asked if I was running for mayor. I laughed it off, but the jar kept filling, and the bridge became a circus. Someone brought a cooler of sodas. A bluegrass duo set up under a tree, strumming banjo tunes on hay bales. By afternoon, a kid with a drone was filming the whole thing, and I had to shoo Rusty away from a plate of barbecue someone left on the ground. It wasn't just the spectacle. People were angry. Willow Creek's HOA had been a thorn in everyone's side for years, finding folks for unapproved mailboxes, sending cease and desist letters over vegetable gardens. My bridge, it seemed, had become their rallying cry, a middle finger to clipboard tyrants everywhere. But Margaret wasn't one to slink away. By the next morning, she was back, this time with an upgraded patrol unit, 3 retirees in neon vests, armed with garden rakes and a notebook for incident reports. They planted themselves at the far end of the bridge, glaring at anyone who approached and scribbling license plates like they were auditioning for a spy movie. "Margaret," I called, leaning on a fence post. "You know this is still my land, right?" She didn't look up from her clipboard. "We're monitoring unauthorized activity," she said, voice clipped. "Your toll operation is a public nuisance and a zoning violation. Cease immediately or face legal action." I pointed at the ferry permit, now framed and hanging in my barn. "County says I can charge. You got a problem, take it up with them." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't budge. Instead, she taped a laminated cease and desist notice to the toll sign, then marched back to her post. The crowd, now a mix of locals and out-of-towners drawn by a viral post on the town's Facebook page, booed her like she was a villain in a melodrama. Someone yelled, "Go find a squirrel, Margaret," and the laughter echoed across the creek. But the tension was real. A few folks turned back, spooked by the HOA's makeshift checkpoint. I wasn't about to let Margaret scare off my rebellion. That night, I called in reinforcements. My cousin Eddie, a welder with a knack for mischief, rounded up a few neighbors, including a tech-savvy teenager named Riley who'd once hacked the high school's Wi-Fi for extra lunch periods. We hatched a plan that was equal parts petty and glorious. First, Riley rigged a projector to beam a looped video of Margaret's meltdown at the sheriff's visit, complete with her rant about unauthorized canine transit, onto the side of my barn. The crowd roared when it went live, the grainy footage turning Margaret into a meme before the moon rose. Next, we printed stickers. "I paid the toll, Margaret," in bold red letters. Riley sold them for $1 each, and they were gone in an hour. We used the cash to buy solar lights, which Eddie bolted to the bridge, making it glow like a runway at dusk. By morning, Dawson's Bridge was a beacon, a glowing symbol of defiance that could be seen from the highway. Margaret showed up at dawn, her face a mask of fury, waving a new notice like a battle flag. "This is harassment," she shouted. "Shut it down or face a lawsuit." "Mail it," I said, sipping coffee. Rusty barked in agreement. Sheriff Laura swung by an hour later, sipping iced tea from a mason jar and eyeing the HOA's neon-vested goons like they were a bad community theater troupe. "Hank," she said, "you stirring up trouble again?" "Just defending what's mine," I said, handing her a sticker. She chuckled and stuck it on her thermos. Margaret, undeterred, escalated. She stormed into town and filed an emergency injunction, claiming my toll booth was an unlicensed business, the projector was visual pollution, and Rusty was a public menace. Her evidence included a photo of Rusty lounging on a picnic table, labeled canine nuisance activity. The county clerk called me, laughing so hard he could barely speak. "Judge'll look at it," he said. "But unless your dog starts robbing banks, you're fine." I wasn't taking chances. With help from a lawyer friend, Clara, who thought the saga was the funniest case she'd ever seen, I filed a counterclaim: harassment, trespass, and interference with agricultural operations. We attached Riley's drone footage, Margaret's threatening emails, and me favoritia recording of her yelling at one of my hens for loitering. Clara said it was the most entertaining brief she'd ever written. The real showdown came at a town hall I hosted on my front lawn. Over 80 people showed up: neighbors, Willow Creek residents tired of HOA nonsense, even a few reporters sniffing a story. Laura moderated, standing between two hay bales like a referee. Margaret arrived with her clipboard posse, looking like she'd prepared for a congressional hearing. The air crackled with tension. Voices rose, accusations flew. A guy in overalls brought a megaphone, which didn't help. Margaret called my toll booth a rural Ponzi scheme. I called her a dictator with a vendetta against wooden bridges. Laura raised her hands for quiet, but the bombshell came from an unexpected source. Walter, a quiet Willow Creek board member who always looked like he'd rather be fishing, stood up and asked to speak. The crowd hushed. Walter, voice steady, revealed Margaret's dirty laundry: fake permit fees, misallocated funds, and a $900 payment to her cousin's lawn service for emergency barricade supplies that included a cappuccino machine and inflatable flamingos. He handed Laura a stack of receipts. Margaret's face went white. She tried to dismiss Walter as disgruntled, but the damage was done. The crowd erupted, some shouting for her resignation, others snapping photos of the receipts. Laura took the documents and promised a full investigation. By night's end, the HOA board suspended Margaret pending an audit. A week later, the judge ruled in my favor. The bridge was mine. The HOA had no authority, and Margaret's injunction was tossed. He even suggested the HOA take a course in boundary law and basic decency. I framed that quote: "Life didn't just return to normal, it got better." The county offered to fund a new fence and bridge upgrades if I'd let them use my land as an emergency access point. I agreed, on one condition: they named the new animal shelter after Rusty. They did. The bridge stood prouder than ever, lit up at night, a symbol of stubborn victory. People kept coming. Kids left treats for Rusty, stickers funded a new chicken coop, and Margaret, last I heard, had moved to another HOA in Kentucky, where she tried to ban porch swings and got voted out in a month. I thought the fight was over. I was wrong. One evening, as I sipped sweet tea on the porch, a letter arrived, tucked inside a fair pamphlet. It was from a regional development agency, proposing a two-lane bypass road right through my land, over Dawson's Bridge. My stomach dropped. Rusty, oblivious, knocked over a flower pot. The war wasn't over. It was just changing battlefields. The letter from the Regional Development Agency sat on my kitchen table like a bad omen, its crisp white paper clashing with the chipped mugs and dog-eared seed catalogs scattered around it. I read it 3 times, hoping the words would shift into something less gut-punching, but they stayed stubborn. A proposed bypass road, 2 lanes wide, slicing through the south end of my property and straight over Dawson's Bridge. The bridge I'd fought for, the one my dad built, the one Rusty and the chickens crossed daily without a care. It was marked for infrastructure enhancement, a phrase that sounded like it belonged in a boardroom, not on my farm in rural Tennessee. I drove to the county office that afternoon, the letter crumpled in my fist. The receptionist, a kind woman named Betty who'd once babysat me, took one look at my face and slid her chair back. "Hank, you okay?" she asked. "Not even close," I said, slapping the letter on the counter. "They want to bulldoze my bridge." She called in Parker Thompson, a slick consultant with a Bluetooth earpiece and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He greeted me like we were old poker buddies, which we weren't. "Hank, this is just a proposal," he said, spreading his hands. "Nothing's set. We're evaluating impact zones, engaging stakeholders." "Cut the jargon," I interrupted. "You're saying you want to pave over my land. Why mine?" Parker leaned back, unfazed. "Your bridge is a convenient crossing point. The creek's narrow there, and the existing structure saves us building a new one. Plus, your land's already got access roads. My land, I said, voice low, ain't for sale or paving. Find another route. He handed me a stack of glossy pamphlets, each showing happy families in cookie-cutter suburbs, as if that would sway me. We'll compensate you fairly, he said. You could relocate, buy a quieter place. This is quiet, I snapped. Or it was till you showed up. I left with a headache and a sinking feeling. That night, I called a meeting, not an official one, just a bonfire behind the barn, with folding chairs and a cooler of sweet tea. Word had spread, and over 50 people showed up. Neighbors, Willow Creek residents, even the bluegrass duo who'd played at the toll bridge party. They were rattled. A road through my land wouldn't just erase the bridge. It would gut the creek, kill the walking trail we'd built, and dump traffic into our little sanctuary. Ellen, the new HOA president who'd replaced Margaret, brought a tray of her famous oatmeal cookies and a worried frown. Hank, she said, we can't let this happen. Sheriff Laura spread out maps on a picnic table, pointing out the proposed route. It's not impossible to stop, she said, but it'll take work. Petitions, public records requests, media pressure. Maybe a protest or two. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak outside sounded like a bulldozer warming up. By morning, I found a crowd at the bridge, holding signs. No road through our roots, save Dawson's Bridge, and my favorite, Rusty says no, with a cartoon of my dog looking like a furry general. It wasn't organized, just a spontaneous outburst of defiance. Kids painted murals on the trail fences. A retired teacher named Carl set up a hammock on the bridge, declaring he was occupying the heartland. I didn't question it. I just handed him a soda. The week turned into a whirlwind. Ellen started a petition that got 300 signatures in 2 days. Riley, the tech-savvy teen, built a website called SaveDawsonsBridge.com, complete with drone footage and a donation link for legal fees. Channel 7 came back, their reporters stumbling over a chicken while I explained zoning laws. The story hit the local paper, then a Nashville news site, with headlines like Farmer Fights Road to Save Family Bridge. Rusty, naturally, stole the spotlight, photobombed every shot, and ended up on a t-shirt sold at the county fair. Parker returned with 2 engineers and a drone, looking less smug this time. He tried to sell me on the benefits, economic growth, better traffic flow, a nice payout for you. I pointed at the creek, where a heron was fishing in the morning mist. That's my economy, I said. No payout replaces it. He blinked, clearly unused to arguments rooted in sentiment. We're holding a public hearing, he said. You can state your case there. The hearing was a zoo. The county courthouse was packed, standing room only, with folks spilling into the hallway. People wore Save the Bridge shirts, some homemade with marker scrawls. Laura spoke first, laying out the legal flaws in the proposal. No environmental impact study, no community consent. Ellen followed, her voice shaking but firm, talking about how the bridge had united Willow Creek after years of HOA drama. Even Walter, the HOA whistleblower, stood up, reading a letter about how a simple crossing had become a symbol of home. Then it was my turn. I didn't have a speech prepared. I just told the story. Margaret's barricades, Laura's boat, the toll sign, the BBQs, Rusty's antics. I showed a photo of my dog sprawled on the bridge at sunset, his local icon sash half chewed. This isn't just my land, I said. It's ours. You pave it. You're paving over our story. The council voted that night. It wasn't close. The bypass was scrapped, my land removed from consideration. Dawson's Bridge was declared a local landmark, unofficial but recognized. Parker packed up his drone and left without a word. The crowd danced on the bridge till midnight, banjos blaring, someone passing around moonshine in a thermos. Ellen cried when we named the trail Oatmeal Lane after her cookies. Rusty fell asleep in a hammock, drooling on a quilt. I thought that was the end, but the bridge had other plans. A month later, a letter arrived from the County Historical Society, nominating Dawson's Bridge for the Regional Registry of Historic Places. Ellen had submitted a packet, newspaper clippings, videos, even an essay titled The Dog Who Saved the Bridge. I laughed, then paused. My bridge historic? It felt strange, but right. I called the society and spoke to a woman named Teresa, who explained the process: signage, limited public access, possible preservation grants. I told her I'd think about it. That night, I walked the trail alone, lantern in hand, the creek reflecting moonlight like a secret kept too long. Rusty trotted beside me, nudging my leg when I stood on the bridge too long, staring at the water. I scratched his ears and decided to say yes. The Historical Society came a week later, cameras clicking, asking about the bridge's origins, the HOA fight, Rusty's role. They photographed the worn planks, the rope railings, even a mural someone had painted on the picnic shed, showing Margaret muttering in defeat. When they left, they promised a decision soon. I didn't expect much, but I felt good, lighter, like I'd shared a weight I didn't know I was carrying. Then the documentary crew showed up. A young guy with a fancy camera and a woman with a clipboard said they were from an online show about quirky small-town stories. They wanted to film the bridge, interview me, maybe even Rusty. I shrugged and gave them the tour. 2 weeks later, their 8-minute segment aired online, capturing the barricades, the toll booth, Laura's boat, and the barn projection of Margaret's meltdown. It was raw, funny, real. It went viral, racking up views from California to Maine. I got emails from strangers asking how to fight their own HOAs. Someone sent a Freedom Bridge t-shirt. Rusty got a fan page. I hadn't planned any of it. I just kept showing up, fixing the planks, cleaning the trail, making coffee, letting the world in on my terms. But the bridge was teaching me something. It wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to the kids painting rocks, the couples watching herons, the dreamers who saw more than wood and water. I was no longer just Hank Dawson, farmer. I was the bridge keeper, and that felt bigger than I'd ever imagined. The air turned crisp as autumn settled over the creek, leaves falling like slow confetti onto Dawson's bridge. I'd taken to waking early, sitting on the porch with a mug of black coffee, watching the mist curl over the water like it was whispering secrets. Rusty would stir just after sunrise, grunting his way to the bridge to claim his favorite sunspot, where he'd sprawl like a king waiting for his court. The routine grounded me, a quiet rhythm that felt like home after the chaos of the past year. The bridge, once a battleground, had become a haven, its solar lights glowing at dusk, the trail bustling with walkers, the air free of HOA clipboards. But stories like mine don't stay quiet in a small town, and Dawson's Bridge was about to take on a life of its own. It started with a wedding invitation, of all things. Hand-delivered in a cream envelope with a wax seal, it was addressed to Hank Dawson and guest, and smelled faintly of lavender. The courier, a nervous guy in a tie, wouldn't cross the bridge, probably spooked by Rusty, who was sunbathing near the mailbox with a half-chewed tennis ball. The invite came from Willow Creek's new HOA president, Ellen, who was tying the knot with a tech consultant named Greg who'd moved into the neighborhood. They were hosting the wedding in Willow Creek's community garden, just across the bridge, and wanted to weave the bridge story into their rustic-themed ceremony. I nearly choked on my coffee. The bridge story, like it was folklore, not a year-long war with Margaret Hensley's barricades. Most folks would have tossed the invite into the chicken coop and called it a day, but my dad always said to give peace a chance, even if it comes wrapped in glitter. So I ironed my best flannel, invited my neighbor Sally as my +1, and hitched up the wagon. The wedding was a sight. White chairs in neat rows, a string quartet under a gazebo, and a floral arch made of wildflowers I'd bet were plucked from my side of the creek. Ellen greeted us with a hug, her pastel sweater practically glowing. "Hank, you're part of our history," she said, which sounded sweet, but made me wonder if I was a guest or a museum exhibit. Rusty, trailing behind with a ribbon someone tied around his neck, was immediately adopted by the flower girls, who fed him cake crumbs. The ceremony was simple, no mention of Margaret or the barricades, just vows and a soft breeze. At the reception, Greg approached me, holding 2 beers and a nervous smile. "Hank," he said, "can we talk about the bridge?" I braced myself, expecting another HOA scheme, but Greg had a different pitch. The bridge's fame had sparked interest in a community project, a scenic walking trail along the creek, crossing my land to connect Willow Creek with the county park. It would be public, maintained by volunteers, and designed to preserve the creek's beauty. "We need your permission," he said. "It's the best route." I listened, sipping his beer, which was better than my usual brand. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep my land private, But another part, the part that had watched strangers paint murals and dance on the bridge, saw possibility. I'll think about it, I said, grabbing a slice of lemon cake that tasted suspiciously like grocery store mix. That night, I sat on the porch, staring at the stars, the creek murmuring below. I'd spent years guarding my land like a fortress, but maybe it was time to share it, just a little. I drafted a proposal the next day. The trail could cross my land, but it couldn't disrupt my animals, my privacy, or my right to fish in peace. In return, Willow Creek would fund a proper gate, new fencing, and trail maintenance. Oh, and they'd host an annual picnic with live music and no HOA speeches, no clipboards clause. I emailed it to Ellen, expecting pushback. Instead, the HOA board approved it unanimously. Apparently, even the stuffiest residents were tired of fighting over the bridge and ready to walk across it. Construction started within a week. Volunteers showed up with shovels and gloves. Kids brought lemonade, and one guy arrived with a falcon perched on his arm, which nobody questioned. The trail took shape, a winding path along the creek, with benches and signs about native plants. The bridge got a fresh coat of sealant, new rope railings, and a plaque reading Dawson's Bridge, EST 1978. Someone tried to add, sponsored by Willow Creek HOA, but it vanished during a rainstorm, probably Rusty's doing. The first annual Creekside picnic was a hit. Laura judged the pie contest, awarding first place to Sally's pecan pie. Rusty won best dressed in a plaid vest, though he chewed off half the buttons. I played harmonica alongside a banjo-playing dentist named Roy. Even Margaret made a brief appearance, standing by the potato salad and sunglasses, looking like she couldn't decide whether to be proud or mortified. She nodded at me once and left before the square dancing started. I let her go. The bridge wasn't about grudges anymore. But the bridge's story kept growing. A letter from the County Historical Society arrived, nominating it for the Regional Historic Registry. Ellen's doing, no doubt, included news clippings, the viral documentary, and that essay about Rusty, the dog who saved the bridge. I called Teresa at the society, who explained the perks, preservation grants, a plaque, and public access a few days a year. I agreed, and when they visited, their excitement was contagious. They photographed every plank, interviewed me about Dad's construction, and laughed when Rusty photobombed their shots. They left promising a decision soon. Then came the documentary crew's follow-up. Their first segment had millions of views, and they wanted more, a full episode, with interviews, reenactments, and a focus on how the bridge united a fractured community. I gave them free rein, and they spent a week filming Laura in her boat, Rusty on the bridge, me recounting Margaret's meltdown. The episode aired online, titled The Bridge That Fought Back, and it exploded. Comments poured in. Hank's a hero. Rusty for president. HOAs are the worst. I got letters from folks in Ohio, Texas, even Canada, asking how to stand up to overreaching boards. A woman in Oregon sent a knitted scarf for Rusty. I didn't know how to handle the attention, so I just kept doing what I always did. Fixing the bridge, feeding the chickens, sipping coffee. The bridge was no longer just a crossing. It was a symbol, a story, a place where people connected. Kids left painted rocks by the trail. An old couple watched herons every morning. Hikers thanked me for the benches. Even Willow Creek's grumpiest residents started nodding hello. I'd become the bridge keeper, not just of wood and nails, but of something bigger, a community I hadn't meant to build. One frosty morning, Laura pulled up in her truck, handing me a coffee and a folded letter. I braced for bad news, but it was something else. The county wanted to fund a small community center near the trailhead for kids' programs, workshops, maybe even goat yoga if I lost my mind. They needed someone to help run it, someone who'd turned conflict into cooperation. You asking me to be a community leader? I said, stunned. I'm asking you to keep doing what you're doing, Laura said, grinning. I didn't answer right away, just sipped the coffee, watching the sunrise glint off the bridge's frost. Maybe I wasn't just a farmer anymore. Maybe I was a caretaker, a storyteller, a man who'd learned to share a bridge without losing it. The first snow dusted Dawson's Bridge in early December, turning the creek into a postcard and Rusty into a furry snowball, chasing his tail across the planks. I'd started spending more time on the bridge itself, not just crossing it but lingering, leaning on the rope railings, watching the water carve its slow path through the frost. The trail was quieter in winter, but folks still came bundled in scarves, snapping photos of the bridge's new plaque from the County Historical Society, which had officially named it a regional historic site. The plaque was simple: Dawson's Bridge, EST 1978. A testament to family, freedom, and community. No mention of Margaret Hensley or her barricades, but I like to think Rusty's paw prints were etched in the subtext. The documentary's viral glow hadn't faded. The full episode, The Bridge That Fought Back, was closing in on 10 million views, with comment sections buzzing across YouTube, Reddit, and even a TikTok trend where kids reenacted my toll booth standoff with toy fences and stuffed dogs. I got used to strangers recognizing me at the feed store, asking, "You're the bridge guy, right?" or begging for a selfie with Rusty, who developed a knack for posing like a canine influencer. A local artist painted a mural of the bridge on the town's hardware store, complete with a cartoon Rusty wearing his local icon sash. I didn't know whether to be flattered or embarrassed, so I settled for buying the guy a beer. Life had found a new rhythm. The community center project was moving forward, with the county breaking ground near the trailhead. They'd agreed to my suggestion of a small library corner for kids, stocked with books about farming and local history. Ellen, ever the organizer, was planning workshops everything from canning to birdwatching, and had roped me into teaching a session on fence building. "You're a natural leader, Hank," she said over coffee at the diner. I snorted, but the idea didn't scare me as much as it once would have. Rusty, meanwhile, had become the unofficial mascot of the center, with a dog bed already reserved in the office. Willow Creek's HOA had stayed out of trouble, mostly. Ellen ran it with a light touch, sending polite emails instead of demands, and the residents seemed relieved to focus on potlucks instead of property lines. Margaret, I heard, was now in Virginia, where her attempt to regulate mailbox heights had sparked a petition to dissolve the HOA entirely. I wished her luck, in the way you wish a tornado misses your house. But peace, I'd learned, is never permanent. One gray morning, as I shoveled snow off the bridge, a pickup pulled up, and out stepped Tom, my neighbor who usually brought jam, but today looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. "Hank," he said, handing me a flyer, "you've seen this." It was a notice from the State Transportation Department announcing a regional connectivity study that included a potential highway extension. The map showed a dotted line snaking through the county, and there, right in the middle, was my land Dawson's Bridge circled in red as a key infrastructure point. My stomach twisted. I'd fought off Margaret's barricades and Parker's bypass, but this was bigger, backed by state money and men in suits who didn't care about herons or hand-carved cedar posts. I called Laura, who confirmed the news. "It's early stages," she said, "but they're serious. They're holding a town hall next week. You'll need to show up, Hank, and bring the cavalry." The town hall was standing room only, the air thick with coffee and anxiety. The state reps, led by a guy named Randall with a PowerPoint and a fake smile, pitched the highway as a boon: jobs, tourism, faster commutes. When they flashed a slide showing the bridge as a redevelopment opportunity, the crowd booed. Laura spoke first, citing environmental risks: no wetland studies, no wildlife surveys. Ellen followed, her voice steady, talking about the bridge's historic status and the trail's role in community health. A high schooler, Riley's cousin, presented a petition with 5,000 signatures, gathered online in just 3 days. I went last, no notes, just me and a photo of Rusty on the bridge projected on the wall. "This bridge ain't just wood," I said. "It's my dad's hands, my family's sweat, our town's heart. You want to pave it? You'll have to pave over us first." The room erupted, some clapping, others shouting, a few waving "Save the Bridge" signs. Randall's smile faltered, but he promised to consider community input. We didn't stop there. Riley's website became a war room, with daily updates and a live stream of the bridge for supporters worldwide. Channel 7 ran a week-long series, The Fight for Dawson's Bridge, featuring interviews with me, Laura, even Rusty, who barked at the camera like he knew the stakes. Protests popped up peaceful but loud, with folks linking arms across the bridge, singing folk songs, and holding signs like "No highway, no way." A national environmental group got involved, citing the creek's rare fish species. The pressure built, and Randall's team started dodging calls. The final blow came at a state hearing in Nashville. We packed the roof farmers, retirees, kids, even the bluegrass duo, who played "This Land Is Your Land," outside. I told the story again, from Margaret's zip ties to the toll booth to the trail's first picnic. I ended with a plea: Don't take our bridge. It's not just ours, it's everyone's who's ever fought for home. The board voted unanimously to reroute the highway, sparing my land and the creek. Dawson's Bridge was safe, not just as a landmark, but as a living, breathing piece of us. That night, we celebrated. The bridge glowed under its solar lights, packed with dancers, fiddlers, and a bonfire that sent sparks into the sky. Laura brought her famous peach cobbler. Ellen handed out oatmeal cookies. Rusty, wearing a new vest, fell asleep in a kid's wagon, surrounded by empty pie tins. I stood by the creek, watching it all, and realized I'd never meant to be a hero. I just wanted my bridge. But somewhere along the way, it had become more a thread tying us together, a proof that stubbornness and heart could outlast any bulldozer. Months later, the community center opened, a modest building with big windows and a sign reading Dawson Creek Hub. The library corner had a shelf dedicated to Rusty, stocked with kids' books about dogs and bridges. I took the job as part-time director, teaching fence building and storytelling, sharing the saga of the bridge with anyone who'd listen. The trail stayed open, the creek flowed clear, and the bridge creaked under the weight of new memories. One spring morning, as I swept the planks, a family stopped by tourists, drawn by the documentary. The dad asked if the stories were true, the sheriff's boat, the toll booth, the pig that wasn't a pig but a dog named Rusty. I grinned. All true, I said, and then some. They left $1 in the jar, now labeled Rusty's Treat Fund, and took a photo by the plaque. I watched them go, then turned to Rusty, who was chewing a stick like it was his life's work. We did all right, didn't we? I said. He grunted, and we walked home. Dawson's Bridge stands today, not just as a crossing but as a promise that a small fight can spark a big change, that a community can rise from a single stand, that a man and his dog can carve out a legacy. I'm not the farmer I was. I'm the bridge keeper, and that's enough. Thank you for joining me on the journey of Dawson's Bridge, a tale of stubbornness, justice, and a dog who stole the show. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, especially on the themes of standing up to injustice and navigating conflict without violence. Have you ever faced a bully like Margaret or fought for something you love? What's your take? Did Hank do the right thing by digging in? Or should he have compromised sooner? Share your stories and perspectives. Let's keep the conversation going. Your voice matters, just like that little bridge in Tennessee.